June 3rd, 2026. Vladimir Putin is preparing to personally welcome business representatives and high-level executives from around the world to one of Russia's most important annual events, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. But a swarm of Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, is on its way to spoil the party. It's just hours away from the event's opening in St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city. After more than 4 years of grinding warfare with Ukraine, this year's International Economic Forum won't be quite as grand as prior iterations, but still represents a key date on the Russian calendar, a chance for the Kremlin to strengthen its relationships with the global south and flaunt its weakened but not entirely broken economic muscles to the wider world. And attendees will be greeted by none other than the country's president himself. Little does Putin know, however, that the 2026 event will go down in history as a symbol not of Russian strength and power projection, but of abject humiliation. More than 1,000 kilometers away, inside Ukrainian territory, pilots and operating crews monitor their screens as their strike drones draw nearer to their targets, ready to rain down fire on some of Russia's most important economic and military infrastructure. Putin thinks he's safe in St. Petersburg. He believes that it's far enough from the front lines to not feel the direct effects of his war with Ukraine. He's about to find out how wrong he is. At this stage of the Russia-Ukraine war, the tide has turned quite dramatically. What began as a presumed procession to an easy victory for Russia in 2022 had swiftly devolved into a grinding, attritional conflict, with Kyiv proving a dramatically tougher nut to crack than the Kremlin had ever envisioned. As the years passed, Russia's momentum slowly but surely slipped away, while its opponent, bolstered by a rapidly emerging domestic defense industry and enormous support from its allies across the Western world, grew stronger. And by May of 2026, it was Ukraine, not Russia, that was in the ascendancy. It wasn't just causing more casualties than Russia could cope with. It wasn't merely delaying the enemy's frontline assaults and even recapturing pockets of lost land along the front lines. It was also orchestrating an increasingly devastating and successful deep strike campaign on targets across the occupied territories and beyond. With every passing week, more reports emerged of Ukraine blowing up and setting ablaze an array of enemy assets, including some of Russia's biggest oil refineries, ammunition depots, air bases, and air defenses. And with every passing attack, paranoia rose inside the Kremlin, even reaching a point where Putin began hiding himself away in underground bunkers, frightened for his life, and almost cancelled his famous Victory Day parade in Moscow's Red Square. In the end, this event went ahead, albeit in a much more scaled-down way, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky humorously signing a false decree and promising not to ruin Putin's special day with his drones and missiles. But that didn't mean Ukraine would ease off elsewhere. Its forces continued to wipe out infrastructure, bringing the full fury of the war home to the Russian population, and vowing to increase the frequency and intensity of its attacks until an acceptable peace deal was agreed to. By the start of June, Putin appeared to be a shell of his former self, and he was banking on the International Economic Forum, known among economists as Russia's Davos, to restore some of his pride and dignity at last. His personal prestige was on the line as he prepared to welcome foreign dignitaries, billionaires, and corporate delegations from places like Saudi Arabia. This was his chance to get things back on track, at least to a certain extent. It was an opportunity to spread his narrative, not just among the streets of Moscow, but on an international scale, to demonstrate that Russia's war economy wasn't as weak and weary as the West claimed, that their sanctions weren't working and the war was going exactly as planned. For Ukraine, however, this was also an opportunity to hammer home its advantage, a chance to show off its military might to a larger and much more diverse audience than usual. If it could strike St. Petersburg at the very moment Putin's big economic party was due to start, Kyiv could show the whole world how weak Russia truly was, undermining every single word of Putin's prepared speech. And there was no way Ukraine could pass up a chance like that. Teams from the Security Service of Ukraine, the Unmanned Systems Forces, the Special Operations Forces, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, and the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine pulled together to prepare an attack that would send shockwaves across the globe, a direct strike on not one, not two, but three of Russia's critical infrastructure hotspots, all in the span of a single day. On June 3rd, the peace and quiet of the early morning St. Petersburg skies was punctured by the low buzz of Ukrainian drones. For a mission like this, one that had to go right, Kyiv couldn't afford to use anything less than its very best assets. While the country's defense forces haven't officially confirmed which specific drones and tactics they used, evidence from similar strikes suggests that they may have deployed the likes of Fire Point's FP-1s. Developed by a Kyiv-based company, these drones boast a remarkable operational range of up to 1,000 miles, combined with the ability to carry warheads weighing between 130 and 260 pounds. They're also equipped with Starlink antennas, which effectively allow them to strike their targets with the utmost precision, even when those targets are at enormous distances from the drone operators. Drones like the FP-1 would have been necessary for a strike like this, as Ukraine was targeting a city approximately 680 miles beyond its own borders. Short-range and mid-range drones simply would not suffice. Only the best long-range UAVs could pull off a plan like this. But distance wasn't the only hurdle Kyiv's military planners had to overcome. There was also the threat that their drones would be detected en route to their destination while traveling across hundreds of miles of Russian territory. All it would take was a single radar to spot them and a single air defense system to activate, bringing down the swarm before it even came close to its objective. But Ukraine has learned its fair share of tricks for dealing with the Kremlin's defenses. Many of its drones are designed to produce only the smallest signature on radar screens, often flying quite low to the ground, skimming the treetops and weaving this way and then in order to easily bypass the likes of the S-400 air defense system. Ukraine has also become increasingly reliant on Decoy jet-powered drones that often don't carry any explosives at all, or just very small quantities of them, that are designed to saturate or overwhelm enemy defenses, giving them so many targets to aim at, they don't even know where to start. Through a combination of these tactics, along with the fact that Ukraine had already cleared out numerous air defenses and radar stations on the way to St. Petersburg, essentially creating a corridor through which its UAVs could safely travel, Kyiv's drones made the long journey to the city once known as Leningrad. There, local residents were jolted awake and rushed from their beds to their windows, snatching their phones and filming the scene as Ukrainian UAVs entered the city's airspace and sped onward towards their target. Automated air defense batteries burst into life as Russian crews made a desperate effort to prevent the inevitable, but it was too late. Traveling at maximum velocity and with the target locked in their sights, the strike drones slammed with surgical precision into the buildings and structures of the JSC Petersburg oil terminal, one of the largest oil facilities in the entire Baltic region. Stretching across more than 90 acres and boasting 21 storage tanks for both light and dark oil products, this terminal boasts an annual throughput capacity of 12.5 million tons. It sits in the heart of St. Petersburg's great port, delivering and dispatching oil and petroleum products by rail, river, road, and sea. It's one of the most crucial nodes in the Kremlin's vast oil economy, and it's about to burst into flames. While the local Russian governor, Alexander Drozdenko, would go on to claim that Russian air defenses managed to down 50 enemy UAVs, the videos and images from the area told a very different story. Drone after drone struck its target, with each impact triggering vast, thunderous explosions that shook the very foundations of the port and could be heard from miles away. Huge fires broke out, with thick, choking columns of black smoke spilling into the sky and blocking out the early morning sun. Panicked residents rushed online to spread the word while officials hurriedly cancelled flights at the nearby Pulkovo Airport. And if Putin thought he'd seen the worst, he was sorely mistaken. This attack was only just beginning. At the very same time drones were striking the St. Petersburg oil terminal, a separate swarm had already separated from the rest and beelined towards a second target, barely a dozen miles away from the first, the Kronstadt naval base. Situated on Kotlin Island in the Gulf of Finland, Kronstadt is arguably an even more valuable piece of the Kremlin's infrastructure. For years, Kronstadt has served as the home of the Kremlin's 3rd Separate Submarine Division and the 105th Brigade of Ships, while also being one of the main repair, maintenance and logistics hubs for the Russian Baltic fleet. It's here that Russian warships, frigates, patrol boats and submarines go when they need any sort of work, and it was only thanks to facilities like Kronstadt that Russia has been able to project power across northern Europe for so long. Throughout that time, this naval base has long been considered an unassailable fortress, safely guarded by a vast network of naval artillery, surface-to-air missile batteries, and other defensive layers. And at any given moment, there are usually upwards of 20 combat ships docked in and around the area, as well as dozens of auxiliary support vessels, all viable targets as far as Ukraine is concerned. Utilizing the most advanced assets at their disposal, maritime-optimized strike drones equipped with real-time video guidance feeds, Ukraine's world-leading UAV pilots screamed past the outer defenses, penetrating the inner sanctum of the island before honing in on the many valuable assets in the area. Just like at the oil terminal, locals rapidly reported explosions, fires, and clouds of smoke as the drones made contact. One of their targets was the Boikiy, a Project 20380 multi-purpose warship belonging to the Baltic Fleet. Equipped and fully capable of firing some of Russia's most destructive missiles, this vessel reportedly entered service in 2013 and was designed to carry out a range of missions including coastal defense operations, anti-ship and submarine strikes, and air defense as well. It boasts a displacement of 2,220 tons, a length of 342 feet, a crew of around 100, and a top speed of 27 knots. Armed with a 100mm A190 naval gun, Uran anti-ship missiles, a Redut air defense system, Packet NK anti-submarine system, and even a Ka-27 helicopter in its own personal hangar, this is not a mere patrol vessel. It's a serious warship, but it was utterly unable to counteract the Ukrainian swarm. In the blink of an eye, before any personnel on the ground even knew what was happening, Ukraine's drones hit the Boikiy from several directions. Satellite imagery and videos filmed from the nearby dock showed fires breaking out and major damage to the ship's superstructure. Additional fires and explosions were reported elsewhere in the area, and it's possible that additional vessels may have been struck, damaged, or even destroyed. Either way, the Baltic Fleet had suffered a serious blow, and the strike still hadn't finished. While the Baltic coast was burning, yet another element of the Ukrainian deep strike swarm was hammering the Russian interior. Approximately 370 miles from the front lines, in the Tambov region, sits the city of Michurinsk. This city may not look like much on the map, but it's home to a critical piece of military infrastructure, the Progress Defense Plant, a sprawling and well-guarded industrial facility that is responsible for manufacturing some of the most vital components that keep the Kremlin's war machine running. According to Ukraine's own defense intelligence, the GUR War and Sanctions database, this is the place where Russia produces the navigational aids and geodetic instruments that allow its missiles to strike their targets so successfully. Crucially, it supplies MP-95 sensors, which are vital for Kh-101 air-launched cruise missiles, as well as GMS-01D gyromotors used in Kh-59M2 and Kh-59M2A guided missiles. Russian air defenses depend on the Progress Plant too. It manufactures electric motors and gyroscopes used in the Pantsir S-1 defense system. So this is an exceptionally important location for the Russian army. It's only because of factories like this that the country can keep on churning out missiles in such massive quantities and using them to bombard towns, cities, military sites, and civilian infrastructure far and wide across Kyiv, from the front lines to Kyiv itself and beyond. These are the engines that drive Russia's power projection. But one of those vital pieces was effectively wiped from the board the morning of June 3rd. Just as they had in the St. Petersburg region, drones swept into Tambov, easily evading Russian air defenses before colliding with the Progress Plant. Locals shared stories of explosions large enough to tear the roofs from industrial workshops and fast-moving fires with the potential to wipe out large parts of the facility. Open-source imagery and eyewitness footage revealed more thick plumes of smoke emanating from the burning complex, and while Russian officials followed their usual playbook of attempting to downplay the incident and claim that only minimal damage had been incurred, the pictures told a different story. One of large-scale destruction, mimicking the impacts at the oil terminal and the naval base, as well as the dozens of other targets Ukraine's drones had struck in the preceding weeks and months. The sun rose on June 3rd to reveal scenes of carnage across Russia's region. Vladimir Putin knew it would be a big day, he just hadn't guessed the reason why. He expected his International Economic Forum to be a source of pride and celebration. Instead, the event went ahead, but with an audible, tangible undercurrent of fear and doubt among its esteemed attendees. Kremlin officials couldn't hide what had happened. The smoke still filled the city's skies. The explosions and fires could be heard and seen in the distance. Russia's image of strength and stability had been shattered overnight for all to see, and nothing would be the same again. Putin could only watch and wonder how he could possibly spin the situation to his favor. His Kyiv counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky, meanwhile, addressed his nation and the wider world on social media, confirming the sweeping success of the country's long-range operations and sharing further information about their effects. He celebrated the long-range sanctions imposed on the enemy and thanked his country's brave warriors for their precision and efficiency in the quest to bring peace closer. Across the world, news headlines were dominated not by Putin's economic event, but by yet another successful Ukrainian strike on enemy territory. One of the biggest and best of its kind, in fact, an attack in which 3 separate targets, all hundreds of miles outside of Ukraine, were struck and suffered serious damage. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte confirmed that the alliance sees no issue in Ukraine attacking viable military targets in St. Petersburg, or indeed anywhere else in Russia, and Ukraine's forces vowed to keep up the fight until the war is won. The wider strategic implications of June 3rd were also clear for all to see. In hitting St. Petersburg and Tambov simultaneously, Ukraine had conclusively proven that it possesses all of the necessary technology, intelligence networks, and tactical resolve to project precise power anywhere it wants, not just in the occupied regions, but deep into Russia too. It demonstrated that distance was no longer a defense for the Kremlin, and that even infrastructure that was supposedly safe was, in reality, anything but. Ukraine also sent a message to Putin that there was nowhere he could hide, nowhere he could retreat to, nowhere he could hope to be at peace. And this wasn't the first time Ukraine had pulled off a daring attack deep inside of Russian territory. To see how Ukraine took out multi-million-dollar nuclear aircraft with thousands of dollars worth of unmanned drones, click the video on your screen right now, and we'll see you on the next battlefield.